Good evening. I declare the meeting of the Port Phillip City Council open, and I welcome members of the community that are here tonight. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukut Willam clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and we acknowledge and uphold their traditional relationship to this land. Council has a local law that determines how this meeting will be conducted, and there's a time allotted in tonight's agenda for public question time. And during public question time, members of the public can ask a specific question on a general matter other than those relating to a topic that's on the agenda tonight. Members of the public are only to ask a specific question and shall not provide any statements or contextual comments relating to that question. Consequently, the official minutes of the meeting will only record the question asked and any response given. The number of questions that a member of the public may ask shall be at the discretion of the chairperson. There's also an opportunity for members of the public to ask a question or make a comment on a specific item on tonight's agenda. This will be done prior to Council considering the item. We encourage comments and questions from the public that are directed through the Mayor that are not defamatory, abusive or objectionable in language or substance, but rather are presented in the spirit of mutual respect of Council and the community. And we ask all speakers to abide by the direction of the Chair. If you wish to ask a question or speak to a report, please complete the blue form that's available at the table just outside the chambers and hand it to a staff member. And I encourage you to try and limit your comments to around 3 minutes and to avoid repeating points that have already been made by other speakers. And please note that all council meetings are now being live streamed. That one thing up there. Live streaming and recording allows the community to watch and to listen to meetings in real time, providing greater access to council decision making and debate and improving openness and transparency. The live stream of this meeting is available on Council's website, and the recording of this meeting will also be available to view on Council's website after about 48 hours. The cameras will film and record councillors at this meeting. However, care is taken not to film or record images of members of the public. If a member of the public asks a question or makes a comment about an agenda item, they will not be filmed, but their voice will be heard in the live stream and recorded. And please also note, in accordance with Council's local law, that this meeting cannot be audio or video taped unless permission is granted by the Mayor. And just before we start the agenda, I would like to extend a special welcome to Councillor Emilia Stravova and Acting CEO Leanna Thompson from the City of Whittlesea that are here to observe tonight's proceedings. Welcome. So we'll move to item 1. Apologies. Councillors, do we have any apologies? Councillor Crawford?
Councillor Gross is not with us tonight.
Thank you. Would someone like to move that? So you've moved that, Councillor Crawford. Seconder, Councillor Pearl. I will now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to item 2, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. So, councillors, the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 21st of June 2017 have been circulated. Are there any questions relating to the minutes? If not, I can see Councillor Pearl's had his hand up to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond to second. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Move to item 3, declarations of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any matters being discussed tonight? Councillor Pearl?
Madam Mayor, I, Councillor Marcus Pearl, declare that in relation to item 8.4 Community Grants Program 2017-2018 recommendations for funding supplementary report 1 that I have a conflict of interest in this matter by way of indirect interest because of conflicting duties.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I, Councillor Tim Baxter, declare that in relation to item 8.5, Community Grants Program 2017-18, recommendations for funding supplementary report 2, that I have a conflict of interest in this matter by way of an indirect interest by close association.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillors, at the time, I'll ask you to leave the room for those reports. I'll move to item 4, which is petitions and joint letters. And tonight we have 2 petitions, councillors. The first one is petition 1, which is on traffic calming measures in Tennyson Street, Elwood. Do we have any? So there's no speakers that have requested to speak on this. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers on the recommendation? No, there are none. Then we have a officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Baxter to move. Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond? Would anybody else like to speak? No? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Great. Now we'll move to item petition 2, traffic configuration. So Bowen Lane, St Kilda Road, Melbourne. No speakers to this item either, councillors. So do you have any questions of the officers? At this stage, we're just receiving this item and we'll hear it at our next meeting. No, so do we have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Pearl, Councillor Bond, a second. Would you like to speak to the motion?
No need to. It obviously is clearly we're getting a response at a future council meeting. We look forward to that response.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond? Would anyone else like to speak to the petition? No? Then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Councillors, will move to item 5, which is the sealing schedule, and we have no documents requiring sealing, so we'll move to item 6, which is public question time. And we have 2 members of the public that have requested to speak. I would like to call on Mr. Jeffrey Love, please. Mr. Love, if you would come forward. It's the usual routine. Pop the microphone on and state your name and suburb, please.
Madam Mayor, councillors, council officers, thank you for this opportunity to address you. I'm Jeffrey Love of St Kilda. Now, my question tonight is regarding the memorandum of understanding of the Elster catchment that's been agreed between the 4 councils and Melbourne Water. And my question is, in light of the memorandum of understanding covering the Elster catchment, what engagement has the City of Port Phillip had with Glen Ira Council regarding the East Village development situated at the headwaters of one of the major tributaries of the Elster Creek and bordered by 3 flood-retarding basins proposed by the Melbourne Water GHD assessment, which I hope you have a copy of. The proposed East Village development in East Bentley is a 24-hectare site with only 4% of open space. I don't know if you've seen it, but I'd recommend a copy. It's very pertinent. Previous developments in Glen Ira, the Old Council Depot residential development at Manchester Grove Glen Huntley, and the Caulfield Racecourse, Stage 1, which is 450 apartments, sold. Stage 2 is under construction. Stage 3 being planned, totalling 11 hectares, have inadequate open space and permeable surfaces, creating increased runoff for the greater inundation of the residents of Elwood. I attended Glen Ira Council last night and brought their attention to these matters. The response was that the matters we raised were yet to be considered, namely they're doing the planning but they haven't yet thought about the flooding issues or matters of water retention. And we are of the view that this kind of development would be covered by the Memorandum of Understanding. In light of their recent record, we believe urgent engagement with Glen Ira is needed.
Thank you,
so
Mr.
the
Love.
question is, that was speaking to the question, and the question is, you've got a copy of it, I think. In light of the MOU, what engagement has the City of Port Phillip had?
Thank you, Mr. Love. I'll ask Ms. Ferris-Miles to come up and address those questions, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we've had 2 meetings of the CEO's Forum for the Ulster Creek catchment, and the third forum that is scheduled is coming up on Friday the 21st of July. So my understanding is at the second forum there was a discussion about starting to prepare a list of projects or planning opportunities across the whole catchment where the opportunity for flood retention, water retention and would be identified. So I want to say thank you to Mr. Love for bringing the East Village development to our attention. I would also say there was a meeting on Monday the 26th of June with directors and general managers from the 4 municipalities across the Ulster Creek catchment, and the task of that workshop was to start to prepare what has been agreed is what we're calling a strategic works plan, which is the suite of initiatives, and that will be presented as a draft at the next CEO's forum, about the suite of initiatives that we would like to explore over the coming 12 months as under the remit of the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding of the CEO's forum. So what Mr. Love has mentioned today is definitely on the list as part of that strategic works plan.
Thank you, Ms. Ferris-Miles. Thank you, Mr. Love. I think many like to ask many Christina Kinst, please. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, councillors and officers, I'm Christina Kinst from St Kilda, and thank you for the opportunity to ask some questions. I do have 2 questions today. My first question relates to the St Kilda Sea Baths Protocol, established in 2000 or so, and then followed diligently until recently, whereby matters of land use and matters of major design are to be determined by council, not by delegation. So the following question has 3 parts. Part 1, why wasn't this protocol used in 2 recent sea baths applications? That is, application 8762010, a proposal to convert part of the rooftop terrace public use space to private use 104 times per year, and application 8292016, a proposal to add a permanent structure to the rooftop for private use 365 days per year as a licensed premises. Part 2 of my question is, will the protocol be invoked for the new sea baths application number 5432017, submitted on the 29th of June this year, for the building and works associated with the construction of 2 external baths at the sea baths? And the final part of that question is, if, on the other hand, the protocol has been abandoned, when and why did this happen? And my second question is on the triangle. Would you like me to proceed with that question, or should I wait for the response to that one first?
Ms. Kinst, I might get the answer to that question first, because they're quite different topics. Ms. Ferris-Miles.
Through you, Madam Mayor. In regard to the St Kilda protocol, I will have to take that question on notice in terms of I'm not aware of the protocol, so I'll have to seek some further advice from officers about what Ms Kinst has highlighted in terms of when that protocol was established. In regard to the two applications that she's mentioned this evening, I'm aware that those have recently been lodged, and we've just received those applications and we've started our early consideration of those.
Thank you, Ms Ferris-Miles.
Thank you. My second question relates to the triangle. Does the zero budget allocation to the triangle in the coming year mean that the work to progress the project, which was identified in the council meeting agenda of the 3rd of May 2017, that is preparing a new planning scheme amendment, advocacy, enabling projects, will these not be going ahead?
Is that your final question?
Oh, sorry, one more part to it. And would you kindly confirm how much, if any, officer time has been allocated to working on the triangle in any capacity this coming year?
Thank you very much, Ms Kinst. Ms Ferris-Miles, that's for you as well.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So what Ms Kinst has said is correct, that there is no budget allocation in the triangle in the new integrated council plan for 2017-18. What I can say is that we've had some initial briefings with councillors, and there is another briefing scheduled for early August to discuss possible opportunities in terms of options to progress the triangle, ranging from doing nothing to doing something. And I would say that the design guidelines that were mentioned in a previous council meeting, that is still scheduled within our existing officer time in regard to our strategic and urban design teams. So that is still programmed, subject to further discussions with councillors.
Thank you, Ms Ferris-Miles. That's the end of the public question time, councillors. So we'll move to councillor question time. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Crawford.
Given the state government's announcement on Monday of a task force into the flammable cladding, and obviously that would be a concern to some residents of Port Phillip, I was wondering if I could get an update of where we are at a council level in, starting to respond and look at this ourselves and in conversation with the task force.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Ms Ferris-Miles, you probably shouldn't have gone back to your seat.
Through you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Crawford indicated, the Premier announced the establishment of the Victorian Cladding Task Force on Monday, which is to be co-chaired by Ted Bayou and John Thwaites. Previous to that announcement, we have been working with the Victorian Building Authority, as this has been an active issue since the lacrosse building was on fire in 2014, and there has been an audit that's been conducted in the City of Melbourne. Coincidentally, one of those buildings happened to be in the city of Port Phillip, and so our municipal building surveyor has been actively engaging with the owners and the building surveyor and builder of that building to ensure that it is safe for habitation for people to stay in that building. We have continued to progress discussions with the Victorian Building Authority, and I actually met with the acting CEO yesterday to discuss opportunities to accelerate an audit and assessment of what we consider to be high-risk buildings in our municipality, and shared with the CEO that our council is very keen to be proactive in responding to this issue. Today we've also approached Rob Spence, the CEO of the Municipal Association of Victoria, in regard to, at this time, this will have a cost implication to council, because we will be required to employ more building surveyors to undertake enforcement activity if that is required. And so we're actively engaging with Rob Spence, and he's a member of the task force.
Thank you, Ms Ferris-Miles. Councillors, any further questions? I have one that I'd like to raise, please. On Friday evening, an officer, Councillor Crawford and myself attended a residents' meeting to discuss Council's relinquishment of the Committee of Management and the processes around the Pickle Street site. I wanted to get some clarification, please, and this is probably specifically clarification to you, Ms. Jeffs. Report on the 19th of April, Report 8.3, Section 5 states that the DET had been in consultation with Council about repurposing the Pickle Street site for up to 2 years. Would you please clarify that statement and let us know what actually happened? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would like to provide some clarification. So the council report inappropriately alluded to that 2-year period. It is true that council and the tenants of the Pickle Street site have been approached by Albert Park College over that 2-year period, but the college and many other interest groups in our city often approach council to use facilities. The college has a big student load, so it's not unusual for that to occur, and that in fact has occurred over the past 2 years. However, we really only met with the Department of Education. They only approached us in December 2016, following which, after some time, council then received the formal request sometime after that. So my apologies that the council report gave the impression that we'd been in discussions with the department for that length of time. That's not the case. And then just to conclude, many people would know that site hosted St Kilda Youth Service, which subsequently now is a Melbourne City Mission, and a very valuable program for our young people, the Skies Heat Hospitality program. So Melbourne City Mission and those young people who accessed that program were still in the building and still undertaking their program. So it was a very sensitive time. It would have been inappropriate for council to be quite public about those discussions that we're having prior to us having confidence that Melbourne City Mission and the students that access that program had a home to go to. So I hope that clarifies it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Jeffs. It does. Councillor Pearl.
Firstly, congratulations, Councillor Baxter, on the arrival of your beautiful new baby. So, well done. You'll get why I said that in a tick. The recent release of the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare report into immunisation showed that one of the suburbs in the city of Port Phillip had one of the lowest rates of vaccination in the state at about 85%, 8% lower than the national average. Could the officers please detail what's council's responsibility in respect to the vaccination of our population? Are we reviewing the results of our initiatives over the past 5 years, given we've gone backwards in the vaccination rate in, I'm not 100% sure on the stats, but one suburb in particular, and I think Albert Park's gone up a little, which is good news, but we've particularly gone down in one. So are we reviewing the initiative that we've done in the past 5 years? And could you please provide details of the initiatives that bring these rates in line with the national targets?
Ms Blair, if you could provide some information around that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll need to take those questions on notice.
No problem. Thank you very much. Any other questions, councillors? There are none, so we'll move on. We'll move to the presentation of reports. So first up, we've got the CEO report, and we have no members of the public that's requested to speak. So, councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got a series of questions, and I can ask them in series or take it in turns with other councillors as is required. First questions regarding the report. So there was an internal workshop which was held in June to discuss ways to align the implementation of the In Our Backyard 10-year strategy with opportunities for increasing affordable housing under the state government Homes for Victoria policy. I was wondering if officers could set out who attended this internal workshop and if there's any outcomes or notes of the workshop.
Ms Ferris-Miles.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, there was a workshop in June and that was with internal staff. So the attendees came from a number of departments, including our property area, communications and our strategic planning and housing area. The intent of the workshop was that in our council plan we have an ambitious target in regard to the delivery of new housing, which is aligned with the growth goal of In Our Backyard, which is to deliver 920 new affordable housing units over the next 10 years. And so officers to support that strategy, the workshop was about increasing our level of confidence around the policies and strategies that we have in place to achieve that target, and starting to map out, particularly under Policy 1, which is Council's pipeline of property, which has an aspiration to deliver 170 units over the next 10 years, about what properties do we have in that pipeline and how many units they could achieve. The first initiative is the Marlborough Street development in Balaclava, and we've started to map that out with the Port Phillip Housing Association in regard to the delivery timeframe. And we're looking forward to reporting on what we have achieved in the last 12 months in the forward plan in the annual report in September this year.
Another question, Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Ms Ferris-Miles, for that response. Next question's regarding to outcomes which were reported on in page 4. So the 2017 staff survey was administered over a 2-week period from 15 to 26th of May. Wondering where the results from the survey are reported.
Mr Carroll.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Those results have only just come out, and we're discussing them internally in the organisation at the moment and sharing the results with our managers and staff. We will be reporting the results in the CEO report at a high level. We have a measure in there around staff alignment and engagement, and that also there would be in future annual reports there will be reporting of that result as well.
Councillor Simic, another question?
Just one more from me. Thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 8, there's a graph which represents community requests responded to within agreed timeframes. And it says that we've, in the last period, we're on 87%, which is a 6% drop from the last period. I'm just struggling to understand the actual graph, the way it's demonstrated, because the bars going up aren't don't represent the actual figures up the top, and also wondering more broadly what the actual agreed time frame is.
Mr Carroll.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The graph is showing both the volume of requests and the percentage that are completed on time. So the horizontal line is the percentage, and the vertical bars are the volume. And so the volume of requests changes from month to month. In May 17, you can see just under 5,500. If you look at April 17, it's probably about 4,500. So that explains the differences there. In terms of the target, I believe the target is 80% will be responded to within agreed timeframes. And those timeframes vary depending on the nature of the request.
Mr Carroll, is there somewhere where the timeframes are set out?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the timeframes are established in our CRM, our customer relationship management system, and it depends on there's a whole range of potential services that we provide. There might be over 100 or so, and different service levels depending on the nature of the service. If Councillor Simic would like, I'd be able to provide a breakdown at some point of those service levels by service.
Thank you, Mr Carroll. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Pearl.
Just one quick one. I was pleased to see page 1, so under Farrar Street Education and Community Precinct, It states that the detailed design will be finalised over the coming months and the park is due to open mid-2018. Do we have an actual opening date confirmed? So is that June or July 2018?
Ms Jeffs?
Through you, Madam Mayor, at this stage our scheduling is showing June 2018. It does depend on a range of things, including our EPA auditing process as we go through remediation. So at this stage we're on track for June and hoping all goes well with that.
So are there any more questions, councillors? Councillor Simic?
Just briefly, Madam Mayor, just one more. It's regarding page 4, where we've talking about live streaming, which was implemented in June, which we were all very happy about. I think it was an initiative that Councillor Baxter pushed initially, and thank you everyone tuning in tonight, including my mum, whose birthday it is today. So very happy about that. Do we have any information about how the live streaming is tracking, how many people are tuning in online, and whether we've had any feedback from the community about how it's going?
Mr Carliner?
Through you, Madam Mayor. We have had some good feedback from the community, not in large numbers, but the feedback has been positive, not negative. In terms of numbers, it obviously varies by meeting. The first meeting had the largest viewership live. That was in the high hundreds, and in subsequent meetings the viewership has been around the low hundreds. And I should also indicate that the recordings are also getting good views, so those views are around 80 or 90 within a week of the meeting.
Terrific, thank you. Any further questions, councillors? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Pearl to move. Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak? Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak? Would any other councillor like to speak? I will briefly. I think the CEO's report is always a fantastic representation of what's actually happened in the month since our last CEO report. It provides terrific transparency about what's going on. I'd just like to also call out in particular the waterfront welcomers, which is featured in the report, and just note what an incredible job they do. And even more so this coming season, there's anticipated to be over 114 cruise ships that come into Station Pier, which is around about 25 more than there was last season. So it's exponentially increasing. So they've got their job cut out for them. So it's always good to see this CEO report. Thank you. Councillor Pearl, would you like to close?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 8.2, which is the appointment of the Principal Accounting Officer. We've got no one that's requested to speak for this item. Councillors, do you have any questions? Councillor Pearl.
Just one quick one. We're a meritocracy here at the City of Port Phillip, and I just wanted to get a very quick overview, if possible, of the recruitment process and the interview process, etc., that led to this appointment.
Mr Carroll.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is a technical position. It's not one that we actually recruit to. It's part of a position, it's part of the CFO's role. The Principal Accounting Officer is a legislative requirement that someone in the council is designated, one of the officers in council is designated as the Principal Accounting Officer to review and sign off on the financial statements. The person appointed is the chief, or the position appointed is the Chief Financial Officer. That position was recruited through a fully contestable, publicly advertised recruitment process. We engaged a specialist recruitment firm to assist us to ensure that we had a great calibre of applications that are available. We went through a rigorous psychometric testing and interview process, including several interviews, and the Chief Executive Officer, who was interim at the time, signed off on the appointment following that process and based on the recommendation of the panel, which was chaired by myself.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. Any other questions, councillors? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Pearl to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak? Councillor Bond, would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Then I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Councillor Simic, do you? No? Yep. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Councillors, I am going to skip for the moment the community grants, and we might come back to them. Well, we will come back to them towards the end. I'd like to move to item 8.7, which is City Powers Partnership. Again, we have no members of the public that have requested to speak. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Pearl?
Just to be clear, it says in the paper there's no additional costs, which is heartening. This assumes we're not going to the launch in Canberra, etc., so there won't be any staff costs of travel, etc., attached to this.
Mr. Walters, I think that was a question.
Let me phrase as a question. Will there be any costs associated with this in terms of travel to Canberra, etc.? Because it says there's no costs attached to the program in the report, but it says the official and the mayor might go to the launch in Canberra.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the reference to costs is the costs of the commitments within the partnership rather than that particular event. So we have not considered the costs of that event should anyone choose to go.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Pearl? I can see you thinking.
Are we intending to go? Will there be airfares attached to this so somebody from the City of Port Phillip can represent the council in Canberra?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we have not determined whether we'll be represented at that event at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Walters.
So obviously if we do choose to go, there will be costs associated with it, and airfares suitably carbon offset would be likely cost, yes.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Bond, sorry.
When will we be informed of whether or not that decision is going to be made?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the decision whether the Mayor or councillors attend this would be a decision for council rather than for officers, so that'll be brought to your attention.
Any other questions, councillors? I'm just wondering, my question to you, Mr. Walters, is this seems like it's a very good vehicle for local government to progress some of its emissions reductions, and the 5 actions that have been submitted are all within what we're currently doing. So how do you see it being of benefit outside of that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll take that one. The main benefit is the opportunity to enhance our position on carbon emissions in the Integrated Council Plan. It's a great opportunity to promote council as a leader within our municipality and outside of the municipality. And I think that this visible leadership officers are aware that this visible leadership is something that our community are looking for. And this definitely aligns with the view in the Integrated Council Plan to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Patton. Councillor Simic?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without giving away how I might vote on this, I've got to say I'm thrilled that this is being brought to the council meeting tonight. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on who else has joined this partnership and what their involvement's been to date.
Through you, Madam Mayor, in terms of the names of the councils involved, they will be revealed at the launch in Canberra, so we will have to take that question on notice. Officers are aware that 21 councils have already signed up to the first round of 25. So by joining at this point, the City of Port Phillip will be part of that leading group and part of the launch opportunity in Canberra, either in person or by spirit.
Councillor Bond?
Could we not show leadership on carbon emissions by holding an announcement via Skype or Facebook instead of having a mass migration of local government officials from all over the country in...
Thank you, Councillor Bonda. Mr Carroll would like to, you're sitting up here, you see, would like to answer that question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I think the benefits of the program are much beyond the brand and the demonstrating leadership. That's important. But as you can see from the report, the broader benefits are also around access to sharing knowledge, direct access to Climate Council experts, access to analytical tools, and potential access to exclusive grants and incentives to support renewable energy projects, which could potentially enhance the benefits of the investment this council has already made and leverage that further.
Thank you, Mr Carroll. Any further questions? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Baxter to move, Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm really excited about this. I think that this is one of those things where we're able to jump in with a bunch of other local governments that are doing great things, and we can show the sort of great things that we are doing. And it's really great to see that we're quite easily able to pick out 5 things that are already in our council plan that are able to demonstrate our dedication to the sort of really important work that the Climate Council does. So I had some conversations with the Mayor and officers around the possibility of joining this partnership and whether there'd be any duplication and whether there'd be any usefulness to come out of this. It's really good to see that this isn't going to cost us anything. This isn't going to duplicate things that we're doing, regardless of whether the Mayor receives an invitation to attend an event. The Mayor receives invitations to attend events all over Australia, and whether she chooses to accept that invitation is always up to her, and those costs involved are always up to council to decide how they want to do that. I don't see this as being any different from any other event that the Mayor might be invited to, and that's totally up to us to figure out how we want to do that. But putting all of that aside, what we're talking about here is gaining access to a group of 25 councillors who are leaders in a sphere that we are also showing leadership in. The amount of knowledge sharing that's going to go on and the amount of data that we're going to get out of this is going to be amazing. I'm really, really excited about the real tangible benefits that we're going to get, the data that we can actually use to make the money we're spending on projects in our municipality go further and do better things. So that's really the most exciting things, as well as the opportunity to have access to grants, which is actual money to spend on doing the projects that our community wants us to do in the city of Port Phillip. So I can see all sorts of really, really great benefits coming out of this. So I'm really, really excited to move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak?
Thank you. We're in a time where we really, really need leadership shown on the issue of climate change, and in taking this step, the City of Port Phillip will be joining a network of local governments around the country that are stepping up to take action on this issue. So it's fantastic that we've been able to have this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of it. Climate change has been identified as a key strategic challenge for our municipality on our newly adopted council plan. It's the first of the key strategic challenges, and the council plan notes some of the threats that climate change poses to the municipality. I'll just read a couple of the excerpts from that. So the council plan notes that much of the city is only 1 to 3 metres above sea level, and that coastal areas are exposed to the impacts of climate change, especially flooding and erosion. It further notes that we can expect increased flooding, storm damage to infrastructure, beach erosion, decreased water quality, security of water supply, reduced summer outdoor activities and hotter urban spaces, and that changing environmental conditions may challenge some members of our community to stay healthy and safe. For example, those experiencing health or housing crises. We have people sleeping rough in the city at the moment, and they will be more vulnerable to periods of extreme heat or cold, and also notes that climate change will have an impact on council services and assets. So greenhouse gas emissions are a huge challenge, and we know that reducing them is one important way to address climate change, but that 99% of Port Phillip's emissions are community generated, and that these are increasing as our city grows and reliance on car travel continues. So those are some of the challenges that we've acknowledged as a group of councillors, and I think that the steps that we've laid out to address those in the council plan are really sensible beginnings. Participation in the Cities Power Partnership aligns with our identified priorities, and we've got some great projects ready to go that I think we'll be really proud to share with our allies in that task. And I'm really looking forward to furthering the opportunities that will be available to us. So this is a great way to highlight the work that Council's already doing, but it's also an external check to hold us to account in progressing the actions that we've agreed as a council to battle climate change. And I think that we need some of those. I'm proud to show my support tonight for effective climate action in Port Phillip, and I'm really looking forward to progressing the work as part of the Cities Power Partnership, should the motion pass.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Councillor Brand?
Yes, I'd like to commend the motion too. I think it's our moral obligation and our mission to be a model of a inner urban city council on its climate policy, and I think that's clearly shown as our ambition in the new council plan. But all the good work that we can do as that is not in itself going to save the world, obviously. I think our best hope is by leveraging from the good work that we do ourselves, advocacy upwards through local government into advocacy to other local governments, and then within the grouping of local governments, advocacy up to state level, to national level, and then combining more closer and closer together from this advocacy to the rest of the world. I think that is where the value will lie in our own work, and so I see this sort of organisation as part of that, as taking our own best efforts and leveraging them through advocacy and unified work and lobbying to the biggest forum, which is really the world stage, which is where the change needs to happen. So I'm very happy to be commending this.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Sorry, that was me turning off your microphone for you. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Pearl?
Happy to support the motion as the 4 initiatives in the motion reflect what's in the council plan, but I will note that this shouldn't be used as an opportunity to go for a junket in July. Why on earth you'd want to go to Canberra in July is beyond me anyway. For ratepayers to pay for councillors or officers to go to Canberra in July. I don't think that's with rate capping where it is and the cost of living pressures in our community, it doesn't really meet the pub test for somebody to go to taxpayers to pay for councillors or officers to go to Canberra for this event. So support the recommendations within the report, but hope my fellow councillors will take that on board if they are considering going on a ratepayer funded trip to Canberra. The other thing I'll just caution officers is we're a member on quite a few of these panels now. So I know we're a collective municipality group in Melbourne that's on a climate panel, which we paid for last year. I think off the top of my head it was $19,000. We seem to be a member of a lot of organisations. The reason we're members of these organisations is to deliver value to ratepayers. So long as we're constantly meeting that test, we have to be a bit careful of saying, well, is there value in this? Should we actually do it? And if we're in this one, can we now get out of the one that we're paying $20,000 on? It's a question, not an instruction, but they're the sort of things we should be looking at. Best bang for buck for ratepayers. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond?
Yeah, just like to second the comments of Councillor Pearl. Very wise comments indeed. We can't be a member of absolutely everything. If we're going to join some, we need to reevaluate some of the others that we've joined. I think each and every year while I've been on council over the last 5 years, we sign up to more and more of these groups, and at some time we need to review which ones are effective and which ones are not.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Simic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I hope Councillor Purr doesn't mind me saying, but one of the reasons I put myself forward to run for council is because I believe that climate change is absolutely one of the biggest challenges of our generation. And I believe that we must really be doing everything we can to tackle the impact and effects of climate change. And I'm abundantly aware that tackling climate change is not a spectator sport. It means rolling up our sleeves and doing everything we can to do as much as we can. One of the great benefits of working with others around the country is that it allows us to send a very strong message to other governments, the state government and the federal government, that action on climate change is absolutely an imperative. There's a lot that can be done locally to change people's attitudes in the way they behave, the way that they respond to energy use and water use and so forth. And I believe that this partnership really gives us an opportunity to work towards some very good outcomes. It's going to take all hands on deck, and I'm glad and I hope that other councillors will see the imperative not to count our pocket change in this instance, but to really roll up our sleeves and do what we can to, like I said, take one of the biggest issues of our generation.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Baxter, would you like to close?
Yeah, look, I'll briefly, I won't add much more except to say that there were many discussions had with officers about whether joining this partnership was a duplication of any other partnerships or groups that we're a part of, and the information that came back was no, this is something different and we'll be getting different advantages and have different obligations with this group.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Then I will now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Well done. Thank you. So I'll move now to item 8.8. So item 8.8 is 142 Chapel Street, St Kilda. So, councillors, today we had a planning forum in which we heard from members of the community on each of the three items that we're about to go into. So we won't be hearing from our community at this point in time. However, you are free to ask officers additional questions or any further questions in relation to the items. So I'll go first now to councillors. Do you have any questions of the officers in relation to 142 Chapel Street, St Kilda? 142 Chapel Street, St Kilda is a Domino's pizza shop going into Chapel Street. So it doesn't look like there's any questions. So we have an officer's recommendation. What's being handed out? So, Mr. Borg, can you please explain what we've just got?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in response to your question, I understand that there's been an alternate motion being prepared in regard to one of the conditions. I believe it's condition 9 that unfortunately don't have it before me. I do now. Thanks. That condition 9 has been amended in regard to the loading and unloading of delivery scooters, and it reads that delivery scooters must be parked and unloaded within the property boundary at all times to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. I understand that it's Councillor Bond's motion.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Borg. I was under this understanding that was a replacement for the officer's recommendation. It's not. It's an alternate.
It's not. It's an alternate motion through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right. So, councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? First up, no. There was some things handed out which probably shouldn't have been handed out at that particular time. I apologise that that's happened. This probably either should have been on our desk. It is not the officer's recommendation. It's Councillor Bond's recommendation. But now I'm going to ask, are there any? Is there a mover or alternate for the current recommendation? Councillor Bond.
I'd like to move an alternate recommendation, and just to clarify, the confusion is there was a page missing. That page should not have been blank in the one that was handed out on our desks earlier, for those of you who read it. So I requested the missing page be included, which it now is. So that's the difference between what was sitting on your desk and what was just handed out just a minute ago. So the alternate recommendation is to deal with condition 9, the loading and unloading of delivery scooters. And the alternate is that delivery scooters must be parked and unloaded within the property boundary at all times to the satisfaction of the responsible authority.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Brand? Councillor Bond, you may speak to your motion.
I'm fairly happy with this proposal. I don't have too many concerns. The only concern I had was that the officer recommendation was to provide a parking spot out the front of Domino's, remove an on-street parking spot and dedicate that one on-street parking spot to Domino's scooters. I have issues with us dedicating an on-street parking spot to Domino's. We get numerous requests from many businesses across Port Phillip for specific car parking spots to be made available to those businesses out the front, from doctors and physiotherapists who deal with sick patients, all the way through to our pubs who want spots for their bands to load and unload out the front of their pubs. And on each and every occasion we deny those requests for dedicated parking bays on the basis that we do not set aside parking bays for any business within the City of Port Phillip. Therefore I disagree with the officer's recommendation in this report, and we heard from the applicant this afternoon, and he said on a number of occasions that it's a very large block and there is sufficient room within that large block for him to make arrangements for the vehicles to load and unload their pizzas within that block, and there's an area at the back of the premises where that could happen, or there's another delivery bay at the side of the premises where they could make that available to happen. So therefore I don't believe it is required for us to hand over a City of Port Phillip parking spot to Domino's for their exclusive use.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Brand, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I actually chaired the community consultation meeting on this particular subject, and I don't know whether there's any members of the community here or watching, but I was very impressed with the breadth and the comprehensiveness of the local community's concerns and the issues that they raised on this issue. And I was also on this planning application, I was also very impressed by the applicant's attitude, flexibility, willingness to find solutions, willingness to put money into better equipment, make changes. It's been quite a robust process and quite a good one. I think one of the compromises that seem to have been reached between the community and the applicant and council was the idea that there may be a dedicated parking bay for the delivery scooters, the new electric delivery scooters. I reckon in practical terms that was probably the best solution, but I do agree with Councillor Bond that the principle of allowing public parking bays to be dedicated to a particular business, I think, is actually not what we should be stepping into, especially as this particular business actually has the capacity to hold its delivery vehicles within its own property and deliver from there. And I know that's not going to suit, certainly isn't seen as the best solution by the residents in the area, but I just think it was going too far as a matter of principle to do anything else, and this property can handle it. I think the fact that they're going to have electric scooters, I think that they said if their roller door wasn't any good, that they would certainly replace it. Everything's in place for an optimal solution here, and so I think the way it's been worded now is actually the best outcome, all things balanced.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Would anyone else like? Councillor Crawford?
I wanted to note that, yes, it was very clear that the applicant is willing and flexible and wanting to work to get the best outcomes for both the business and the residents, particularly the electric scooters. I also want to note that one of the other objections that I am concerned about was not only is it dedicating a parking space to a particular business, it also comes right near a crossing for the local school where there is a lot of pickups and drop-offs, and it's already a highly contested area for parking, so I think it would have been inappropriate to nominate it for a business in an area where there is greater need, or a lot of need already existing, and so that's already challenging, area for parking as it is. So I will support this amendment, alternative motion. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Simic.
Madam Mayor, I have a number of two questions for the officers in regards to this matter. Is there an appropriate time to ask those questions?
You can only ask a clarifying question at this point. Is it a clarifying question or not? No. Okay, so we've finished with questions. Anybody else would like to speak to the motion? Then, Councillor Bond, would you like to close? No. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next, we'll move to item 8.9 on the agenda, which is 3 Docker Street, Elwood. We have no members of the public that have requested to speak, as we've already heard from them in today's forum. So, councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Simic, this is when you ask the question if you have a question on Docker Street.
I know, Madam Mayor, but an alternate recommendation was put forward, and I had a question regarding the alternate recommendation, which I was hoping to ask the officers, but there was no call made for that during the meeting.
Any questions on 3 Docker Street? There are none. Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? You put your hand up, and if you get in first, I'll ask you. Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Do you have a motion or an alternate motion?
I do have an alternate motion. Should I read it out in full?
Yes, you can read the changes, and we'll see if we've got a seconder.
It's basically all changes. So, so the alternate motion is for refusal, that the responsible authority, having caused the application number 555/2014/B to be advertised and having received and noted the objections, issue a refusal to grant a permit for the use of the land for the purposes of a medical centre (brackets physiotherapy practice), brackets, a reduction of car parking spaces and the installation and display of internally illuminated business identification signage in association with a 3-storey building at 3 Docker Street, Elwood, on the following grounds. Shall I note the grounds? The proposal does not adequately satisfy the relevant objectives and strategies of the local planning policy framework, namely 21.04-1 brackets 5, land use, housing and accommodation, 22.01, non-residential uses in the residential zone of the Port Phillip planning scheme. 2. The proposal would be inconsistent with the decision guidelines of clause 32.08, general residential zone of the Port Phillip planning scheme. 3. The location of the proposed medical centre, brackets physiotherapy, is not considered appropriate as it does not abut a non-residential zone. 4. The proposed medical centre (brackets physiotherapy) use would have an unreasonable impact on the amenity of the adjoining dwellings, resulting from the increase in traffic generation, hours of operation and light spill from the internally illuminated signage. 5. The proposal would not provide adequate on-site car parking and would add to on-street parking pressure in the immediate area, inconsistent with Clause 52.06 of the Port Phillip Planning Scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crawford. Councillor Baxter, you may speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So basically the issue that we've got here is that we've got a residential street that abuts this property is very close to abutting the commercial activity centre of Ormond Road in Elwood. And the proposal here is to actually move the commercial area a little bit into the residential area. And the reason why that is being considered is because it's under the category of a medical centre, which is the physiotherapy that is planning to be in there. I have an issue with that in that if it was any other business, we wouldn't be looking at this. And I consider the physiotherapy to be a business much like any other business on Ormond Road. And in fact, there are many vacant shops on Ormond Road that the business could move to if they did need more space. And so that's the first issue there. And the other ones are about basically its impact on the street in terms of traffic and parking and amenity.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Crawford.
So I am aware, particularly in Elwood, which is the least serviced of the municipality by public transport, that car parking is a key issue and continues to be. And obviously there needs to be role and advocacy for perhaps greater bus services and things like that. But at the moment, to get to that particular part of Elwood, one must drive or walk. I note that perhaps if someone's injured or going to a physiotherapy, it's probably more likely to drive. So at the moment, we are also undertaking an integrated traffic strategy for the entire municipality, because parking and with the densification, obviously this is an issue that will continue to plague the municipality, and we would like to try and look at what strategy is possible to make the best of this issue. So I feel that unfortunately, by adding another business with a waiver of car parks, it does not will not be a wise decision in an already difficult area to park, and so I will be supporting this alternative motion for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Bond.
I won't be supporting this alternative motion, and I'd just like to flag that if in the event this alternate motion is unsuccessful, I will move the original officer recommendation. I don't think there's any chance of this if the applicant chose to go to VCAT of them not being successful. And what would be at risk here is all the conditions we have put into this recommendation, such as the number of practitioners at any one point in time, the number of clients, patients, signage, the retention of the front fence, the hours of operation. All those conditions are at risk should it go to VCAT. I think we have a good compromise outcome here, and if it was to proceed to VCAT, I fear those would be lost. And I also disagree it doesn't abut a commercial zone. I think there's a lane separating this property from the commercial zone the other side. So I won't be supporting the alternative recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, then, Councillor. I'll actually also speak that in the event that this motion fails, I will also foreshadow that I'll be supporting Councillor Bond's alternative motion. Councillor Baxter, would you like to close? Okay, then I will put that motion. All those in favour? All those against? That alternative motion's failed.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the original officer's recommendation.
Councillor Bond has moved the original recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak?
No, thank you. I think we've already discussed it.
Councillor Pearl, would you like to?
I support the officer's recommendations. There's obviously been a large number of community concerns about this, and I think the officer's report details a reasonable settlement, reasonable outcome rather, not a settlement, in terms of from a planning perspective that's taken in consideration the majority. We're obviously not going to be able to please everybody, but the majority of the concerns, in my mind, in any case. So I support the officer's recommendation, and it's the risk of this balance in terms of potentially losing the control to VCAT, where we potentially get a worse outcome for our local residents. So I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Brand, was that?
Yep.
Councillor Brand, then I'll go to
Thank you. Look, it's a very difficult. It's a small decision, but it's a very difficult one, and I'm sitting right on the fence, I've got to say. But I see the only two issues. Really substantive issues that would be affecting local residents would be the illuminated signage, which is easily dealt with. Certainly the size of the business is being strictly limited, but the parking is obviously, to me, the main issue. But my investigations, or the answers that I've got from my questions from officers, indicate to me that really the difference, the expert opinion is that the difference in parking loads that would arise from two apartments in that building versus this one practice is negligible. Really sort of hard to separate one from the other. I certainly think if it was a significant number of car parks, I would be voting the other way, but I just can't see that there's enough difference in the predicted parking impact on this to really prohibit something that somebody wants to do legitimately in a use which is a permitted use in the area. And yeah, I feel sorry for people who are going to be upset at our decision, but I just don't have enough evidence myself to disallow this application.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Councillor Crawford.
I will be speaking against this original motion. The other factor that I did not mention in the alternative one is that if it's a business that's moving to a larger premises, and although we have the condition of only 2 practitioners, if there was to be a 3rd practitioner and there are enough consulting rooms in the new plans for that, then that would be a greater increase required in the parking, and that would be a greater waiver. And I guess from my personal perspective, I find it hard to understand why you would move premises if you were not intending to grow a business. And so there are concerns for me that perhaps the conditions we have placed are not perhaps feasible for the kind of move that is being requested.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Are there any further councillors wishing to speak? If not, Councillor Bond, would you like to close? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8.10, which is 202 to 214 Normanby Road, Southbank. There are no members of the public that's requested to speak. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? There are none. Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do we have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Bond to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak? Councillor Copsey. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Brand. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. So we'll now move to item 8.3. So we'll go back to the community grants councillors. We'll move first of all to 8.3, which is Community Grants Program 2017 to 18 recommendations for funding. This is the first report, and there are no councillors that have any conflicts in this report. We don't have any requests from members of the public to speak. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers? Councillor Pearl?
When will is the public notified of the result of the grants? And how does that take place?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, the public is definitely notified of the outcomes of the grants, and especially through, I guess, the council meeting tonight. We get approval of those grants, and then we produce what is known as an e-book, and it is advertised through our internet to let the general public know of the outcomes. Otherwise, all those grant recipients are also notified through letters and things after the grants have been approved.
Thank you, Ms Fraser. Councillor Pearl?
How can the community be rest assured that the grants that are being given will be monitored and producing results to the community according to the criteria of the grant?
Through you, Madam Mayor. We don't currently, I guess, have a reporting process back to the community around the outcomes of the grants, but we do have acquittal processes for all of our grants, and they have project status reports that happen mid-year as well, so that we can track how each grant recipient is going through to the end acquittal process. But we do also have on our internet at the moment, we have some case studies of previous grant recipients via a video mechanism, so people can see what the outcomes are of some of those grant recipients currently.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, councillors? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a Councillor Simic?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move an alternate recommendation.
Councillor Simic, would you please outline what that is, please?
With respect to this recommendation, I'd like to add a 1.4 to the recommendation. Would you like me to read the full recommendation or just a
Yes,
addition?
please read it.
So that council endorses the community grants.
So just the addition.
Number 1.4. Okay, so the addition on of number 1.4, which reads, receives a report collating the outcomes and community benefits of the community grants program following the completion of the grant acquittal process.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Bond? Councillor Simic, please speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, thank you to the officers for the report. Thank you also to the officers, the councillors, the community members who took part in reviewing the vast number of applications that were received. It's an important function of council to be supporting community and community endeavour, particularly in the fields identified in this report. It shows that we've got a thriving community, a community that's able to build on ideas and potentially work towards bigger successes. The addition of 1.4 came out as a result of a conversation with Mayor Voss this morning. It was the Mayor's idea, and she made the point quite clearly that it is important for us to have an end-to-end process where we, in the first instance, approve the grants and then also have overview over the acquittals and the outcomes of the actual processes and grants themselves. This makes us better able to in future make decisions about where council money should be directed and also able to assess the decision we're being asked to make tonight. An incredibly important decision because it is a considerable amount of money that we are able to lend to this. I'd like to thank also the officers and for putting council in a position where we do have the financial capacity to support the community. Very important. So I'll leave it there. I commend the alternate recommendation and also once again thank all of the officers, councillors who were involved in this process and also community for their commitment to community growth.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak? Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Brand?
Yes, I'd just like to say that this is an absolutely fantastic program, serving excellent causes, run by wonderful people, and one of the most onerous parts of the whole grant program is having to write the application for grants, and one of the other onerous tasks is writing the acquittal of those grants. So I think this is actually going to reward the people who have to write the acquittals, which they must do, clearly. It'll reward them by actually giving it a public audience where we can, and a council audience where we can actually see what the results have been, see what they have to say, and congratulate and value that all the more for having read it. So, good.
Thank you, Councillor Brand. Councillor Pearl?
I just want to thank these two superstar officers for the hard work they put into it, and the system and processes you've built make the Councillor Crawford and I were lucky enough, fortunate enough to be on the assessment panel, which was a lot of work, and it was made a lot easier by the systems and processes that you put in place. I understand there's a number of potentially reviews in place about the way we go about submitting these, and 1.4 hopefully doesn't add to this, but there's this wonderful balance between bureaucracy for compliance purposes to ensure our ratepayers are getting value for their money and bang for buck, and also not a onerous amount of work, so community groups and groups of individuals can apply to these grants to get the funding they need to ultimately deliver outcomes to the community which are vastly superior than anything the council could provide in their niches that they work in. So I just hope any reviews that are going on internally match that balance. We want less professional application writers and more grassroots wonderful initiatives that are helping us achieve our council plan. So thank you to you wonderful people. Thank you also to the community panellist members that were on it. They were truly diverse, in my opinion. Some long-term residents, new residents, young people, older people. It was and everybody was enthusiastic, capable, and competent. And it was a very large work to ask people to do for no monetary benefit, only the benefit for them serving their community. Hundreds of hours of work was probably put into it all together. So. And well coordinated by you two wonderful people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. Councillor Crawford.
Well, I couldn't let this moment go by being part of the the panel that judged on or made decisions around these applications. I wanted to also acknowledge the number of people in the community that did apply. Unfortunately, we do not have the resources to fund all of them, but there were many, many worthwhile projects. I also wanted to acknowledge thank you to the officers for all of your hard work and to the community members. But the thing I think that really heartened me as part of the process, I won't say it was the easiest, shortest, quickest panel to be a part of, but very interesting to get a real understanding of the breadth and depth of the kind of work that goes on in our community, from small things to much bigger things, from, as you, Councillor Pearl referred to, more organisations who are focused on doing this, to just little groups of people who think they can make a difference by trying to add this program into our community. And really, when it gets to the bottom line of what we do at local council, it is all about supporting community. So it was actually a real honour to be a part and to get an insight into the kind of programs that we are supporting. And you know what? As much work as it was, I'm happy to be on the committee next year.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Copsey.
I will keep it brief, but I just wanted to echo the sentiments of my fellow councillors. Again, we will make the list public once successful and unsuccessful recipients have been notified. But just reading through this list, it's a group of local heroes and superstars who help us deliver our initiatives and the outcomes we're seeking from our work as a council. The social justice outcomes that are possible through this program are truly heartening, and it's one of the ways that City of Port Phillip can invest in our community. So thank you very much for all your diligence in progressing this and getting the report to this stage. Thank you to the community members who've led their expertise and time, and to everyone who's participated in the process. And I'm particularly happy to be supporting the alternative recommendation, because I think that the report will not only give greater transparency and accountability through the process, but it might be a good way for us to further highlight and celebrate the great outcomes that are achieved through our community grants program.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. Before I hand that back for Councillor Simic to close, I also would like to thank all the applicants for putting in, for trying their hardest to have a piece of this small pie, but necessarily a very important pie. I'd also like to congratulate heartily the recipients. I'd like to thank the officers very much, and I certainly look forward to seeing the outcomes, the community panellists, and also the two councillors that were on this, Councillor Crawford and Councillor Pearl. Thank you very much. Great job. And also Councillor Simic for putting up the alternative motion. I think this adds a dimension to it that's very important. Councillor Simic, would you like to close?
No need, Madam Mayor. I think enough's been said. Once again, just congratulations.
Then I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to item 8.4, which is the Community Grants Program Supplementary Report number 1.
Madam Mayor, if I could just disclose a conflict of interest. I, Councillor Marcus Pearl, declare that in relation to item 8.4 Community Grants Program 2017-2018 Recommendations for Funding Supplementary Report 1, that I have a conflict of interest in this matter by way of indirect interest because of conflicting duties.
Thank you, Councillor Pearl. We'll call you back in a minute. Councillors, any questions of the officers? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Crawford to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak? Councillor Bond, would anyone else like to speak? We said it all in the first one. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Pearl. You may come back in. We'll go to item 8.5. Councillor Baxter.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So I, Councillor Tim Baxter, declare that in relation to item 8.5, Community Grants Program 2017-18 Recommendations for Funding Supplementary Report 2, that I have a conflict of interest in this matter by way of an indirect interest by close association.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. We'll see you shortly as well. Councillors, any questions about report number 2? No? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Pearl to move. Councillor Copsey to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Councillor Copsey, would anybody else? Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Baxter, you may return. We'll move to item 8.6, which is Community Grants Program Supplementary Report number 3. Any questions of the officers, councillors? No. We have an officer's recommendation. Councillor Pearl to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter to second. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Councillor Baxter, would anyone else? Then I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So then we'll move towards the end of the report again. So we'll go to 8.11. I think I've covered off all the others, yes? We'll move to Planning Permits Delegates Report for May 2017. We've got no one that's requested to speak. Councillors, is there any questions? Councillor Simic, are you wanting to move? Yes, Councillor Simic to move. I will accept that. With it, Councillor Pearl to second. Councillor Simic, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just again highlighting the huge number of planning applications facing our municipality and the huge growth that we are experiencing. Thank the officers for the work that they've put into making sure that applications are responded to as quickly as possible and that there's clarity for people who use our services through the application process as to how we're tracking. So really just like to commend all the work that officers are doing in order to action the huge number of applications facing our municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Simic. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak?
Happy to
Would any other councillor like to speak? Then I'll now put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So we'll move to 8.12, which is the Palais Theatre, the Community Purpose Reservation Days. Okay, the name's changed from St Kilda Jazz Heritage Launch. Councillors, any questions of the officers? I'll ask a question, please, if we can just have a short explanation about this and when is the launch?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The launch will occur as part of Council's Live and Local program in August of this year. Last year we changed the Live and Local program from being at the time of the St Kilda Festival to winter to achieve some activation in our very valued local activity centres. So we're really proud to be able to host this. So I think the details of the actual St Kilda Jazz Heritage program are a little bit secret, so you'll have to stay tuned for that one. But yeah, come to Live and Local and you'll find out all about it.
So one further question is, how is the Palais planned to be used? Is it sitting or is that still secret as well?
Madam Mayor, I believe that it's in the foyer of the Palais that will be mostly used for this launch. So there's been some fantastic works going on there. So it's a great place to host the launch.
Thank you, Ms Jeffs. Any other questions, councillors? Then we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover for that or something different? Councillor Copsey to move and Councillor Bond to second. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak?
So one of the very valuable parts of the revamped Palais Theatre is this understanding that there are community purpose days available for our local community, and there are a selection of great events held every year where, as the report notes, developing our policy, but this is a great opportunity to put a really excellent event on one of those days, and I'm really looking forward to all that jazz.
Councillor Bond.
Yeah, to say how good it is to see the Palais Theatre being used again after being closed for the January, February, March through to about May for renovations. I think just got an email earlier from the Palais Theatre advertising all their upcoming events. This will be the 6th event there during August. I think there's 7 planned for September, so we're starting to see the number of events being booked at the Palais Theatre to increase, including bands like Boney M, Ice House. It's great to have them all back in St Kilda again, so I fully support this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bond. Any other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Copsey, did you want to close? And then I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Terrific. Okay, move to item 9 now, which is notices of motion, and there are none. Item 10, any reports by councillor delegates? Councillors, do you have any reports to make? Not this week. Okay, and then we'll move to item 11, urgent business, and there is none. So there being no further business, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you. Thank you very much.